Hello students, welcome to Btech360. You know that we've been doing a series of those colleges which we think should be a part of your option set. You obviously would want to get into the IITs, NITs, GFTIs and IIITs and so on and so forth. But we thought we should also identify a set of colleges which possibly are very popular in the states and have very student outcomes. For that reason, if they're also admitting students from all over the country, it should be a part of your option set or your consideration set. In that process, we also went to the Telangana state and started looking at those colleges which are most preferred through the state counselling. And the college that I'm about to talk about is one such college, where it is one of the more preferred colleges in Telangana or in the state of Telangana, specifically in Hyderabad. And when we looked at the data, we thought, why is it so highly ranked? Why is it so highly preferred? And the data that we're about to show you will explain to you whether we should be looking at it as a great option or whether you should not be looking at it as a great option is something that you will obviously decide for yourself, because it's always a question of what are the choices that you have, what are the options you have, and whether in that relative sense, whether this particular college fits your bill is something that you will also obviously have to look at. But what I'm going to talk about now is about an institute which is called the Chaitanya Bharathi Institute of Technology, which I think at this point in time is also a university. Now, before I move further and talk about this particular college, please subscribe to Btech360. Two, if you want to talk to us personally, there's a WhatsApp number, message us and we'll be happy to talk to you. And three, more importantly, if you want me to cover any college or examination, write to us in the message box below the video and we'll be happy to cover that. This was founded in 1979. So it's one of the earliest engineering colleges in the undivided Andhra Pradesh. Now it is a part of Telangana only and it is based in Hyderabad, very close to Hyderabad. It's a private institution, of course, and the ranking in NIRF is in the rank band of 151 to 200. Which means in the NIRF ranking, which is done by the Ministry of Education, Government of India, this particular institution is in the rank band of 151 to 200. There is no exact number, but that's the rank band at which they are, which is a decent number in a certain sense. It's spread over 51 acres of land. The total students is 6,105. So it's quite a large institution from that perspective. And we're only talking of the UG 4 years, mind you. When you deal with it that way, then the intake of this particular college would be about 1,600 and above. Right, we don't know how much it is each year, but maybe as we move along in the data, you will find that. But the intake is quite high for this particular college, of which the boys are about 63% and girls are 37%. And about 8% students come from outside the state of Telangana also. And most possibly they're coming from Andhra, mind you, because earlier it was undivided Andhra, so that is where there might still be some kind of attraction for people from Andhra to come out to Telangana and study in Hyderabad, because Hyderabad has a lot of employment opportunities. Hyderabad is a bustling state. A lot of software companies have established presence there. A lot of GCC have established presence there. And from that perspective, a lot of students want to study in a college in Telangana, in Hyderabad specifically, because getting a job is slightly more easier as compared to many other districts, right? And about 91% come from within the state, and 70 students come from outside the country also. And this possibly would be NRIs or OIC students, what we call overseas Indian citizens, and that might be the possibility here because 70 students come from outside the state of India also. And the faculty is 390, which means we're dealing with 1:15, 1:16 kind of a faculty student ratio. Now remember, what we're trying to do is always uncover those colleges which also have a quota for students all over the country who can come and join this particular college, and then also talk of the placement numbers and why we think the college should be preferred. In that process, we also looked at the data of the placements of this particular college. Remember, we told the college is very well preferred by students who are taking the TG EAMCET set examination, which is a Telangana state common entrance test, right? So there, this college is very well preferred. Now, when we looked at data, this is what we found here. In 24-25, which is the latest data, this is submitted to the National Institutional Ranking Framework, which is the Ministry of Education, Government of India. So this data is submitted by the college or the university to Ministry of Education, Government of India to understand. That data is what we accessed. When we accessed that data, we found that in 24-25, 1,413 students graduated. We're not talking of number of students who were admitted, mind you. We're talking of the number of students who graduated, right? Because in 24-25, we're essentially talking of slightly earlier, but these are number of students who are graduated, 1,413. Of this 1,413, 901 students were placed and 167 students moved for higher studies is what the college claims. Now, when you look at this 900 and 1,413, there is a stark number out here because we're essentially saying about 60 to 63% students only are placed. About 35-37% students are not placed. Now that's a very big number for me. If you ask me personally, about when you actually have about 512 students not getting placed or moving for higher education for a B.Tech. We're talking of B.Tech, mind you. I mean, because in B.Tech, typically, if you have a good placement, students don't go for higher studies. Like you go to IITs, for example, about 95-98% students who get placement move on, and that's how it works. Like CSC students, for example, in any of the IITs, don't go for higher education. They move for job, and then later they might deal with a higher education prospect at some point in time. But when you look at this, about 512 students is the gap here, and that number of students not placed. And now, assuming that 512 students are not placed, even the median salary is dramatically lower at 6 lakh rupees. Now, the median salary being 6 lakh rupees for me is a shocker, because when you're talking of one of the more preferred colleges through TG EAMCET, then ideally the median salary, because the quality of the student intake is so high that the quality of placement should be higher and the number of placements should also be higher. That's what I would presume, but that doesn't seem to be happening here. And that for me is a bit of a red flag, because on one hand, you're dealing with about 37% students not placed, and the median salary being 6 lakh rupees. Now, if median is 6 lakh rupees, you can also imagine the bottom quartile, it would be about 3.5-4 lakh rupees. That's what we're dealing with, and that bothers me a bit, especially for a college which is high in merit or high in merit intake. Now, when you look at that same data here, you'll realize what my concerns are. That you actually have an intake of 1320, admitted is 1387, lateral entry is 147, total graduated is 1413, because we're talking of admitted 1387 plus 147. So I don't know again what's the gap here, which is did not graduate. And of this 1413, 901 students were placed, 167 moved for higher studies, and they claim 72.5% placement, right? But for me, it's 901 over 1413, right? And that would mean about 63-64% students only getting placed. And that again bothers me, because this 72.5% is considering that 167 students actually moved for higher studies. The question for me is, when I look at the other data of the better engineering colleges, you really notice that a lot of B.Tech students, I'm not talking about BS students and all, I'm talking about B.Tech students specifically, they do take a job if it's a good offer that comes their way. So for example, you take some of the IIT's data and CS department, you will actually see that most students who graduate actually get placed. Almost 95%, 100% placement happens. That doesn't seem to be happening here. And despite that, the placement is 6 lakh rupees. That's a big question mark for me. A big red flag for me. So that is where the story is for me. Now, moving further, when I actually looked at it further also, they obviously talk of about 122 companies visited the campus, 1053 placement offers, and 51 lakhs being the highest package. This is the highest package, by the way. But another data that I saw is, for example, here they talk of 24-25, 950 students were eligible registered for students, is what they placed, is what they say, right? Now, and student places 779 is what they claim, right? And 82% placement. We're talking of 24-25, by the way. They claim 779 students were placed. But when you deal with the NIRF data, they talk of 901 students getting placed. We're talking of 24-25 cycle and 901 students getting placed. So which one is correct? On one hand, you're talking of 901 students getting placed, and on the other hand, on their own institution website, which we are showing here, they're talking of 779 students getting placed, and from 1,413. By the way, if you now look at another problem that I have here, remember I showed you earlier 1,413 students graduated, and here they only say 950 students were registered or eligible for placement. Now, what happened to the 1413 minus 950? What happened to the other balance, which is about 463 students? Why are they not eligible for placement, or why did they not even register for placement? Now, both are big questions for me, because the students place here is 779. In the NRF data, you show it as 901, right? And here, the number of students who registered for placement is 950, whereas the number of students who graduated, which we saw in the NRF data, Government of India data, is 1,413. So, what happened to the 463 students in between? Of this 463 also, they also say 167 registered for higher education. One doesn't know about that, but one doesn't guarantee those kind of numbers. But very clearly, there is a lot of discrepancy, and big gaps are opening up in terms of the data that I see at this point in time. One, what is there on the college website, and one, what is there in the Government of India website. Is it that they're working on the ranking that 901 was submitted as placed, or what is the 717, what is the 901, what is the 950? One doesn't know anything at this point in time, and that creates a lot of confusion and doubts in my mind about the college. Now, moving further, we discussed the placement, but I'll also talk to you about the kind of seats that they have. They do have civil is 120 seats, mechanical 120, electronics and communication is 180, CSE is 360, EEE is 120, information technology is 180, chemical is 60, biotechnology is 60, 120, AI and data science is 120, CSE with AI and machine learning is 180, BE computer science and engineering is 60, and electronics engineering with VLSI design and technology is 60. So that's the kind of intake. When you look at this day, it's 1,680 is the total intake. 1,680. The number of students placed, if you recall, of course, it's a 4-year-old batch, is 779. And that is, again, creates a lot of issues in my head. Because on one hand, you're unable to place those students. On the other hand, you're expanding the thing. Of course, some of them are new branches that are needed by the country also. But the important thing is that you're actually increasing the intake while you're still holding on. The placement is something that you're faltering as you move along, right? Because if you now look at this here also, while there has been a massive increase in the number of students, here the number of students who are registered for placement is almost remained the same. 2021, you had 952. And in 24-25, 4 years later, you have 950 students. So number of students who register for placement is lesser. The number of jobs have almost remained static. But the intake is growing to 1,600 and 1,680. Now, all those things are a question mark in my head, right? Now, moving further, now let's understand what is the admission procedure. I was also looking at the admission procedure. 70% is the convener quota through EAMCET, which is the examination that we discussed, which is we call it EAMCET now, EAPCET. These for the state students of Telangana, right? And then management quota is 30%, of which they go through JEE Main, EAMCET or IP scores, and minimum 50% marks is in PCM is compulsory, includes merit and NRI seats also, 30%. So about 15% they give it through JEE and 15% through management quota possibly is what they give. And there is also lateral entry, which you also saw there. But 70% students come from the TG EAMCET thing. What if you're working from outside of Telangana, then the pathway for you is this JEE Main and management quota. That's what you're dealing with. Now, TG EAMCET also determines the fee that you charge. For the people who are coming not through TG EAMCET, the fee is much higher. You should know that, right? Now, what is the admission procedure? As I told you, A category is 70% of the seats. Of the B category, which is management quota, 15% of the seats for the candidates throughout India without reservations through IIT JEE Mains ranks, TG EAMCET ranks, and qualifying exam marks. And 15% of the seats are for NRI sponsored candidates through qualifying exam marks, right? And the qualifying exam marks is the class 12 score in many of the places, right? So you can be in Middle East and come down to Hyderabad to study, that's a possibility, or USA also, right? But 15% through JEE and 15% through NRI and all, and 70% through TG EAMCET ranks. Now, TG EAMCET, if you look at it, the total number of students who registered is 2,20,000, but number of students who appeared is 2,07,000. So for you, keep this number at 2,07,000 in your head so that you understand what kind of percentile you need to get into this particular college, right? Now, when we look at the highest closing cutoff in the general category, open category, this is what it is. For IT, it's 5,161. Remember, 2 lakh students, so we're dealing with 97.5 percentile. For CSE IoT, it is 3,738. Again, go back to 2,07,000, you're dealing with 98 percentile. And here, AI and data sciences is 3,147, which means we're dealing with 98.5 percentile. So, the reason why we actually had to trace down this particular college is because it seems to be the most preferred, like CSE AI and ML is 2,321. So, now you work backwards, we're dealing with 98.8 percentile, right? CSE is 2,148 and Biotech BIPC is 1,349. It's a different examination altogether. 2,158 for CSE, which again, if you go back, it is 99 percentile. So, what we're dealing with is for some of the premier branches that they have, the percentile that you need is about 97 to 99 percentile for you to stand a chance and getting into it. Of course, the core branches are less competitive because for mechanical it's 44,042 for boys and girls is 26,571. Biotech MPC is 30,630, Chemical is 25,864, Triple E is 22,840, Civil is 14,533, EVL is 9,478, and EC is 6,040. Right? So we're dealing with 6,040 being 97 percentile, 9,478 being about 95 percentile, and so on and so forth. And going up to 44,042 and also for mechanical. Now, if you work back at mechanical at 44,042, we're dealing with 80 percentile or 81 percentile. So the thing that we are dealing with here is that, 78, 79 percentile. The thing that we're dealing with is that some of the core, the primary branches that you have, which is on the CSE, IT and those kind of sites, it seems to be one of the most preferred colleges that you have in the state of Telangana, especially in Hyderabad. And that is the reason we actually had to, come down on it and try to understand why people are preferring. And that's where we saw the data of placements and placement numbers, where we do think that there's a big disparity between what the site claims and what has been submitted to Government of India. And that hopefully will be coming out very soon. Now, what is the fee? The latest fee that they declared is 4th March 2026. There was a GO by the, by the Higher Education Department of State of Telangana, right? Now, this was declared to all the colleges that are there in the state of Telangana. What is the fee that they can charge? There, the CBIT, right, has been permitted to charge 1.83 lakh rupees per annum, right? 1.83 lakh rupees per annum. Now, this is one of the highest fees that can be charged by any of the colleges, because when I looked at the data of the other approvals, it went out to 40-50,000 also. But this is one of the highest ones that I saw. Now, what are the companies that are coming for recruitment? CBIT is very, advantageous place as far as the location is concerned. It's in Hyderabad, and Hyderabad has many corporate offices, and that makes it easier for you to get a job. So, Moxa AI, Unistring Technologies, IBM India, Masquer Technologies, JP Morgan Chase, PPO, Intrains Innovation, Barclays, Cognizant, Infosys, L&T, Mindtree, Bank of America, Accenture, Deloitte, Barcadia, Asian Paints, ITC Limited, Franklin Templeton, Alliant Group, Matrix 4 Analytics, MRF Limited, Tata Advanced Systems. So you have all the large companies, because Hyderabad, as I said, is a base for a lot of companies out there, and because of which you actually have many recruiters coming in for placement. Now, the data that we saw, and by the way, when I looked at the 6 lakh being the median salary, it actually fits in with the kind of recruiters that you have. Remember, this TCS, Accenture, Infosys, all these people typically pay about 3.5 lakh rupees. The fee is, the salary that they pay is about 3.5 lakh rupees per annum. And this has not increased for the last 20 years. All these companies have increased the top line, have increased the profits, have increased everything, have increased the manpower also. But the salary that they pay in 2010 and 2026 almost remains the same. They have not increased despite the inflation where it's doubled. These companies have, kept the salary exactly the same, because they're working on the demand supply. Whatever it is, even at 2 lakh rupees, students will want to go and join these companies, which is what they're taking advantage of. For me, it's in a certain sense, it's an abuse, right? But TCS, about 245 students are working right now. 617 students worked at some point in time. We found 23,756 students who claim that they studied at CBIT and are found on LinkedIn. So that's how we got this data. So we went to LinkedIn, understood how many students actually claim that they studied at CBIT and what are they doing now, and which companies are they working. When you looked at that data, in TCS, 617 students worked at some point in time, and right now 245 are working. In Accenture, 1,165 students worked at some point in time, and right now 260 students are working. In Infosys, 997 students worked at some point in time, right now 237 are working. And in Deloitte, 80 students are worked at some point in time, today 310 are working. So very clearly, these companies go here for placement, and when I looked at the median salary, they would be offering about 3.5 lakh and something around that, and not much. They might be giving some for that 7 lakh and those kind of packs, but mostly it's 3.5 lakh rupees is what I noticed, because that's the reason why the median salary there fell dramatically. Right. Now, we also looked at, now some of these students would be brilliant, mind you, and because of the brilliance, they would actually work hard to move up and get into better careers in better companies also. So that also happens, which means the learning and teaching at this place seems to be decent. And from that perspective, when I look at that, Meta, there are 15 students right now working, which is good, because they're all the biggest companies on earth at this point in time. Meta, 15 students are working. Apple's 37 of the CBIT students are working. Amazon, 219 students are working. NVIDIA, 15 of their students are working, and Google, 64 students are working. At some point, in fact, in Google, 214 students worked at. Remember, Google has a massive office in Hyderabad, so that works in its favor. Amazon has an office in Hyderabad. NVIDIA doesn't have, and Apple and Meta. But the students here are skilled enough and learned enough that they could find a way of getting into some of the biggest companies on earth, which is very, very good. We moved further and tried to understand how are the students domiciled, where are they staying? Are they staying in Hyderabad? Are they staying in India? Are they staying outside of India? And this was a very, very sharp data. This also proves the kind of students that you have in Andhra and Telangana who typically at some point in time move out for greener pastures. That seems to be very clearly the case here, because 79% students are in India, which means 21% of CBIT students are world over. Now, this is a very good number. 21% is extremely good number. In fact, 15% of the students, about 3,636 students who claim that they studied at CBIT are in USA. Right. So, very clearly, the students have found a way of getting into the biggest companies, have found a way of moving out of India and getting into good companies. So, all those things seem to have happened, which also speaks good about the institution or the students who are joining this institution in that sense, right? So, that is the data that we have at this point in time. The simple thing, as I said, we were looking at those colleges where anyone from anywhere in the country can apply because they are good colleges. From there, for that purpose, we started looking at the states and colleges in some of the best, most preferred colleges in those states. There we got into got a hold of CBIT. But when we look at data, the data, there are wide gaps in the data. I don't like the late fee structure that they have created for whatever reasons. It can be for only for JEE students or even for TG EAMCET students, assuming it's there for TG EAMCET students. I don't feel comfortable when such high late fee is charged, right? Either you have it or you don't have it. Even if you have it, that tiered thing of 2,500, 5,000, 10,000 disturbs me no end, because ultimately, if you look at the placement and the median salary, that also opens up a lot of question marks. And by the way, the fee that I showed you here is for the 70% only. The 30% who are JEE or management quota, we don't know the fees yet, right? In the case of Karnataka and all, we saw that the fee is extremely, extremely high. And of course, donation is banned, but one doesn't know how these things work out. But the 1.83 lakh per annum fee that we showed you is for the TG EAMCET 70% students where the state has some control. The 30% we don't know, and you already saw the median salary. So for all these reasons, it is for you to decide whether you want to join this college or not. I keep saying this, that every college has an option for some students. So some students might not have many options, so they figure into some other any college that comes their way also. But the simple thing is this, for me at this point in time, I feel very uncomfortable with the kind of placement data that they have and the variance of placement data between what the site shows and what the NIRF data shows, the median salary that is there, the fact that only 60-65% students are placed, which means 35% students are not placed, despite charging such high fee, bothers me a bit. It is for you to take. I thought I will review this college because I've already done the research and it has to be presented to you. It is for you to decide. If you want me to do any college, please write to me here. If you want to talk to us personally, there's a message, a WhatsApp number. You can always reach out to us. And more importantly, please do subscribe to Btech360. Thank you so much. Namaste.